As a former fashion model and a former counsellor, how on earth did I become a director at a football club, and a football club that was the first in the world to pay women the same as men? I would say that I didn't have much of a relationship with football before moving to Lewes, and if I did have a relationship with it, it was because I didn't like it. We moved to Lewes in 2007, and my husband Charlie immediately wanted to get involved in the local football club. He helped mutualise the club in 2009 when it was on the brink of financial ruin with 5 other guys. But I just left them to it because football's football, and to me, I didn't want anything much to do with it.
How would I describe Lewes Football Club to someone who doesn't really know it? So Lewes Football Club is a small club near the south coast in East Sussex in England. Since 2010, it's been a community-owned, a mutual football club. But more esoterically, I'd describe it to someone as an optical illusion, really. So it appears to be very small, but in fact, it's very big because of its massive campaigning agenda that it has. So at the core of it, I describe it as a purpose-driven football club and the mouse that roared. In terms of when me and Ed Ramsden, another fellow director, first started hatching the idea of Equality FC, every year a third of the board stand for re-election. So me and Ed were coming up for a 3-year period. This was in 2016. So Ed said to me in the run-up to the election, what if we paid the women the same as the men? What if we gave them all the same resources? And he hadn't really got to the end of the sentence. I said, absolutely. This is something we should do. A, because it's the right thing to do. And then the B didn't really come till later, which is it turned out to be a commercially accidentally smart thing to do.
The way I got involved was that Charlie at Ed Ramsden said to me, as a woman and a bit of a feminist, what would you say if we said we were going to pay the women the same as the men down at Lewes FC? I was really surprised at this question because I didn't know that women played football. It had never really occurred to me. So I was like, what? There are women there? And then I thought, hang on, you guys are running this football club. There's women there and you're not paying them the same as the men. What's wrong with you?
It's the perfect response because you shouldn't be testing these ideas with people inside football because they're already, in the nicest sense, brainwashed and conditioned. But if you talk to a woman outside of football and state that, then of course they're going to go, well, Dove doesn't even talk about its women's team. What do you mean they're not paid the same?
When I researched about women's football, I realised that women had been banned from playing football for 50 years in this country. So for 50 years, men had had a monopoly on this sport. They'd had a monopoly on broadcasting rights, on sponsorships, on the kind of cultural takeover of football, so that someone like me growing up in the 70s thought that it was all about men.
During World War I, men who had worked in the munitions factories were needed at the front. That meant that women moved into the factories because there were more shells and those kinds of things needed. But it also gave them a bunch of friends and some time to play football together. And they decided it's a kind of double war work where they work in the munitions during the week, and on evenings and weekends they play football to raise money for charity, playing in major stadiums week in, week out, and drawing large crowds of up to 50,000. One of the most famous teams ever was Dick Kerr Ladies, who came to prominence during World War I, played at Preston North End's ground for their very first match, had 10,000 paying spectators. They began internationals as well, playing against France. And this image is at Atlanta FC, which was a group of professional women, nurses, teachers, etc. In 1921, the FA banned women's football from pitches affiliated to the Football Association. The FA claimed that football was unsuitable for women So they couldn't ban it as such in law, but they could stop women using the major stadiums that they had during World War I. And in fact, they extended the ban to every pitch affiliated to the FA. So that was a blanket ban all over the country. And when women tried to play on rugby grounds and cricket grounds, the FA used their influence with the other sports codes to get them to stop using those grounds too. So it forced women's football underground. The legacy of that ban is still with us very much today because it invented a myth that women's football was not as spectacular or as exciting, and it's put women's football at least 90 to 100 years behind men's football.
It made me feel so angry that a ban that I had never known about was actually having these repercussions in my own life. It had taken me away from something that could have made me stronger as a woman. And there were people out there saying that these women didn't deserve the same as the men without knowing this hidden history of women's football, without knowing that they used to get bigger crowds than men. I resolved right there and then to go and watch a women's football match. So I went down to watch a match here at the Dripping Pan. It wasn't what I thought football was at all. This is how we need to see women. This is exactly what I want my daughter and all her friends to see, what I want my own friends to see, what I need to see. This is what we need to see.
When I grew up, it was like I see a lot of, obviously, the men football. They become your heroes. And then kind of when she's watching it, she can't kind of relate to them because they're men. So bringing her to the women's football, she can look up to them and wants to become them. They're her heroes. So yeah, I think it's really important.
My football story started when I was very young, younger than Bella. I played for an all-boys football team because back then they didn't have girls' teams. And what I lacked back then, I'm seeing that she's getting now, which I appreciate a lot. And being on the sideline, encouraging her and her friends, it means everything.
I think just seeing young girls and seeing how excited they are to possibly play at this level, it's just so amazing.
I feel like super proud that we've been a part of like the movement and the journey, not as much as the Lionesses, for example, but everybody plays a part in growing the game.
After my first match watching Lewes FC women, I volunteered to tell other women that I called unwelcome women like myself about what was happening at Lewes and asked them to come and watch a football match, even if they didn't like football, to come in solidarity with the cause for gender equality. I really wanted it to work for women, for girls, for men, for everybody, because I know that if you have a more equal society, you have happier people.
One of the crucial things about introducing Equality FC was that as soon as we'd done it, no one could say it couldn't be done. And we got a lot of pushback. Initially, some internally, some from fans, a lot on social media. What a surprise. But that was great because the pushback meant that we could then constantly hone our argument.
What people don't sometimes realise about Lewes FC is that it wasn't just about pay. It was about the other aspects of a footballer's life, the kind of behind the scenes support that Lewes were able to offer the men and the women.
What makes Lewes different than other clubs is that you feel part of the community and you feel that when you play every game, like they're behind you.
Previously, I've been at places where you're treated as a player before you're a person, but here it's kind of different. They respect you as a person before your number on the back of your shirt. Yeah, it's just a really special place to be.
I volunteered to tell women's groups. I went out and I told them about what was happening at Lewes. And I started to get really involved because I started to feel quite responsible for all these new kind of match day virgins that were coming along to these Lewes women's matches, meeting each other. They were networking. It was brilliant. We were creating a buzz. We quadrupled the gate in just 2 seasons. So when you run a football club, there are 3 ways of making money for us: our sponsorships, ownerships and match day revenue. So all 3 of those things increased after the introduction of Equality FC.
We have an amazing pitch which the FA gave us £750,000 to make. We would not have had that pitch. We wouldn't have had a huge sponsorship from Lyle & Scott without the Equality FC.
You'll notice a few things as we go around the ground that are specific signals to tell girls and women that they are welcome at this football club. So one thing, as you come in through the turnstiles, you can see that we have dedicated places to breastfeed. And then moving on, you'll see that we have lots of women-only toilets, which is very unusual for a football ground, I can tell you that. Here we have Inexorable, which is a statue of Anne Bonny and Mary Read, who had to dress as boys in order to make a living from piracy, and who now watch the women on the pitch. And they were actually intended for a place in Devon, but they were rejected on the grounds of being inappropriate. So we said, we welcome unwelcome women here. Please, can we have the statue? So now we have this amazing work of art at the Dripping Pan. In women's football, we really need boots made for women. We need shirts made for women. We need sponsorships that recognise women's football culture as different to men's. And this is what I is saying that was done by Charlotte Colbert, the amazing feminist pop art artist. This is our community garden. We now have over 40 volunteers growing tomatoes, growing leeks, growing herbs. We've got a bug hotel. We've got fruit trees growing. And we're just really proud of it. We're a community-owned club. We welcome everybody, and this is one of the ways we do it. You like gardening? Don't have to like football. Come and watch a match.
We did the garden, and then I realized we can also do, community work, even if you don't like football. But we do creative writing, we do cooking, we do composting. So it attracts people who don't like football coming in, and then they like football. So that's the kind of thing, It's like a magnet. It pulls people together, yeah.
I think genuinely you get the warmest welcome that I've ever seen at any football club here. And I think just the feeling when you come in, I hope that everyone who arrives at the football club thinks this is a place where it's really nice to be.
Looking back on Equality FC, I think what I'm most proud of is its changes in attitudes. There was an independent survey done inside the club, and when they asked the men's fans here, 73% of them said they had changed their attitude towards gender equality and equality because of Lewes FC. So it works.
There were shortcomings with Equality FC. At the time when we introduced equality at Lewes, there was an equivalency to be drawn between the women's third tier side and the men's step 7 in the non-league. And we actually multiplied the women's budget by 10 in order to make it equal to the men's. But as the women's game started to become more and more popular, the requirements to run a team became more expensive. So we had to move from equality to equity. So we had to pay the women what they needed within their context for their playing budgets, which was more than the men. They were now in the Championship, which was the second highest tier of English women's football. But that wasn't enough. We got relegated back to the third tier 2 seasons ago, which means we needed more than just equity on the women's side. So it became that the men's team was actually holding the women's team back financially, unfortunately. So we needed to move from equity to what I would call emancipation, which is when the women's team branches away from the men's, gets separate investment and can function on its own.
The example that I give is Angel City FC in the United States. It's female owned, it's feminist branded, it's community based, it has its own completely separate identity. For me, Angel City FC are changing the potential model, not just of women's football, but I think also what men's football could be, because it's giving opportunities for local communities to be very invested in a much larger storytelling conversation about what our club is.
I think in terms of what the next generation of players and fans will find, obviously the hope is always that they'll find it's like, what's the fuss about? It's just normal. It's just normal to come along and support women's football in exactly the same way as men's football.
What do I think the next chapter of women's football will look like? I hope it involves equal numbers of women in the governance of football. I hope that more women and young girls will enter football as innovators, entrepreneurs, and disrupt the current narratives of the industry.
Whether you like it or not, football's the most important sport in the world, the most popular. Therefore, what we do in football is important. It demonstrates to all of us what women's place in the world is.